They dragged Celeste by the elbows through snow gone gray with ash and old blood, her boots slipping on the frozen stones of Dark Hollow's central yard. Every jolt tore through her lower back and into the taut weight of her belly. 7 months. Her pup kicked hard under her ribs, a sharp protest that made her bite down on a cry. "Keep moving, traitor," Beta Corvin snarled behind her. "I can walk," she said, breath fogging, throat raw. "I can walk if you stop wrenching my arms." He tightened his grip anyway. The council fire burned too bright for dawn, crackling under an iron brazier where judgment was passed. Wolves stood in a ring around it, warriors in winter leathers, elders wrapped in fur-lined cloaks, mothers clutching children who stared wide-eyed at Celeste as if she had fangs dripping poison. Overhead, bare branches rattled in a cutting wind, and the scent of fear, contempt, and wet wool thickened the air until she could barely breathe. Her father stood at the edge of the council dais, jaw locked, hands clasped behind his back. Her mother stood beside him with her chin lifted, as rigid as carved bone. Neither met Celeste's eyes. The High Elder unrolled a strip of hide across the stone table. "Patrol reports from the northern border," he announced. "3 nights of breaches. 3 sightings of Shadowfang scouts crossing where only our sentries knew the blind path." Celeste's skin went cold. "That path changed last moon. Half the patrol roster knows it." "Your name appears in each report," the elder snapped, "signed by patrol leads." "Signed?" She laughed, breathless and disbelieving. "Then call them. Let them look me in the face and say I betrayed my pack." A murmur rose through the circle, quickly strangled. Corvin stepped forward and tossed something onto the table. A cloak, dark wool stiff with dried blood, reeking of iron and rot. Her own stitching marked the hem. A crescent and thorn motif she had sewn in as a girl. "Found in her den," Corvin said, "beneath her sleeping furs." Celeste stared at it. She hadn't seen that cloak in weeks. She had thought she'd lost it during late autumn hunting drills. "That blood isn't mine," she said quietly. "Sent it. It's old, it's from a boar kill. It carries Shadowfang trace." Another elder cut in. "Do not insult us." "I am not insulting you. I am begging you to use your senses." Someone in the crowd spat near her feet. "Whore thinks she can cry innocence and spread her legs out of punishment." Her wolf snapped against her ribs, furious, but exhaustion held her human shape in place. She lifted her chin and searched the faces she had grown up with. The baker who had slipped her sweet crusts as a child. Her old training partner. Her cousin in the back row. All looking at her like she was carrion. "Mother," Celeste said, voice breaking despite herself. "Tell them. You know where I was when the second breach happened. I was with you in the infirmary." Her mother's fingers whitened where she gripped her sleeve. She said nothing. "Father?" He looked at the fire. "The council has spoken." Something inside her gave way with a soundless crack. The High Elder lifted a branding iron from the brazier. The hooked sigil of exile glowed orange. "Celeste Dark Hollow. Charged with treason, collusion, and seduction of enemy wolves to weaken our borders. You are stripped of rank, name rights, and den claim. By winter law, you are cast out before migration. I am carrying pack blood," she said, voice climbing. "You would exile a pregnant she-wolf into the dead season without trial? You forfeited trial when you opened our gates." "I did no such thing." Corvin shoved her to her knees. Pain lanced up her thighs. Her hands hit stone slick with frost. Her pup shifted violently, and nausea flooded her mouth. The elder lowered the iron. "Hold her." She fought then, wild and desperate, twisting hard enough to wrench one arm free. "Don't. Please, please don't do this. I swear on moon and bone, I am innocent." Her father took one step forward, then stopped when Corvin looked at him. The iron kissed the back of her shoulder. Flesh hissed. The world went white-hot and silent. Then the pain arrived in full, tearing a scream from her throat so raw it felt like her lungs had split. When she could see again, she was curled over herself, panting, tears and spit on her chin, snow melting under her palms from the heat of the burn. The elder's voice came from far away. She leaves before sunset with the migration train, 1 blanket, 1 blade, no escort. A woman near the front muttered loudly, "Should have slit her throat instead." "No," Corvin said with cruel calm. "Let winter do the work." Celeste pushed herself upright on shaking legs and looked one last time at her parents. Her mother finally met her gaze. There was grief there, and fear. Fear of the council, fear of standing beside a condemned daughter, fear stronger than love. Her father still would not look at her. That hurt worse than the brand. By dusk, while the pack loaded sled frames and bundled children in furs for the southern migration route, they stripped Celeste's den bare. She was handed a coarse blanket that smelled of mildew and an old bone-handled knife with a nicked edge. Corvin walked her to the north gate, where the wind came knifing through the pines. "If we catch your scent near our trails again," he said, "we'll finish what the elder spared." Celeste clutched the blanket tighter around her swollen belly. "I hope someday you choke on your own lies." He smiled. "Run, traitor." The gate slammed behind her. For a long time she stood in the dark, listening to the pack she had loved disappear into the sound of creaking sleds and distant howls. Then she turned toward the wilderness and began to walk. The first hour she kept to the old game paths out of habit. The second, a storm rolled down from the high ridge and swallowed the moon. Snow came sideways, stinging her face, packing into her lashes. By the third hour she could no longer feel her fingers around the knife. Her burn throbbed with each step. Her boots rubbed her heels raw, her belly tightened in hard bands that stole breath and then eased, leaving a tremor behind. Not labor, she told herself fiercely. Not yet. Just fear. Just cold. Just stress. She repeated it like prayer as she stumbled deeper into the pines. Around midnight she heard wolves behind her. 3, maybe 4. Moving fast and careless. Dark hollow scents. Corvin had lied about letting winter kill her. They wanted to make sure. Celeste ducked off the trail and slid down a ravine choked with thorn bush. Branches clawed her arms through her torn sleeves. She pressed herself behind a fallen cedar and held her breath until her chest burned. Above, voices drifted in gusts. Found tracks? Lost in the drift. She can't have gotten far. Check the creek cut. If she shifts, we'll hear her. She shut her eyes. She couldn't shift safely now, not with her body strained and her pup so far along. They knew that. A cramp seized her lower abdomen, fierce enough to fold her in half. She bit her fist to keep from making a sound. Her wolf whined inside her, trapped and frantic. The voices moved away. Minutes passed, then more. When she finally dared move, her legs were pins and needles, and the cold had bitten straight through to bone. She crawled from the ravine and forced herself north instead of east, away from known trails, toward a place no sane wolf would choose in winter, the charred boundary of old Silvermane land. Everyone knew the stories, how Shadowfang had burned their halls 2 years ago, how survivors scattered, how the territory was cursed, empty, haunted by ghosts and smoke. Good. Let fear guard what she had left. By dawn, the storm broke into a brittle gray morning. The forest changed underfoot. Blackened tree trunks rose like broken spears. Here and there, stone markers jutted from drifts, carved with half-melted crescent symbols. The air smelled faintly of old fire under fresh snow. Celeste made it to a ruined watchpost and collapsed against its leaning wall. Her blanket was crusted with ice. Her lips were split. Her body shook so hard her teeth clacked. Just rest a moment, she told herself. Just until the dizziness clears. When she opened her eyes again, the light had shifted. Voices snapped through the trees, sharp, disciplined. not Dark Hollow. She reached for her knife on instinct, but a boot pinned her wrist before she could lift it. Don't, a male voice warned. She looked up into unfamiliar faces, silver bands braided into dark hair, scarred jaws, eyes alert and unsmiling. Silvermane insignia marked their pauldrons, not burned out, not dead, rebuilt. A she-wolf crouched beside her, scenting the air around Celeste's neck, shoulder, belly. Her expression changed from suspicion to something like alarm. "She's branded," the scout said. "Dark Hollow exile mark, pregnant. 7 months, maybe more." "Could be bait," another replied. "Bait doesn't barely have a pulse." They hauled Celeste to her feet. The world tilted. She swallowed bile. "Please," she rasped. "I need water." One scout lifted a skin to her mouth for exactly 3 swallows before pulling it away. Cautious mercy. Their captain stepped in front of her, broad-shouldered with a white slash over one brow. "You crossed Silvermane boundary without summons. State your purpose." "I was cast out," she said. "I have no purpose left." "That's not an answer." She almost laughed, because honesty had cost her everything already. "Then here's one. If Dark Hollow trackers find me first, I die. If you decide I'm lying, I die. I chose your border because I was tired of running." The captain studied her a long beat, then nodded once to his wolves. "Bind her hands. Not tight." A strip of leather circled her wrists. They marched her through burned pines toward a spread of tents and half-built timber walls rising from the ruins of an old stronghold. Wolves moved with relentless focus, hauling beams, stacking stones, setting perimeter stakes. Not a broken pack. A pack rebuilding its teeth. By the time they reached the central encampment, the sun was sliding low and the eastern sky carried the first strange bruise of red. Blood, moon, night. Whispers followed her through camp. "Dark Hollow exile. Look at her shoulder. Goddess, she's with Pup." The captain stopped at the largest war tent, its entrance flanked by carved silver stakes. He ducked inside first, then jerked his head for her to follow. Heat from braziers struck her face. Maps and patrol markers covered a long table in the center, and behind it stood a man built like winter oak, dark hair tied back, hands braced on the wood as if holding up the world. A thin scar cut through his lower lip. His presence hit like pressure before a storm. Controlled, immense, dangerous. Cain Silvermane, she realized, with a jolt of dread. He looked up. Scent hit first. Smoke, cedar, rain-charged air. Her wolf slammed against her ribs so hard she staggered. Fire raced under her skin. Her unborn pup kicked, brutal and sudden, stealing her breath. Across the table, Cain went dead still. Silver flashed through his irises. His fingers clenched, the table edge splintered under his grip with a crack like breaking bone. Every wolf in the tent froze. Cain's voice came out rough, stunned, almost disbelieving. "Mate. Mate." The word struck the tent harder than a war drum. Celeste's knees nearly buckled. Heat and cold crashed through her in the same breath, like stepping from blizzard into fire. Her skin prickled with violent awareness. Every scent sharpened until she could separate the pitch in the braziers from iron nails in the tent poles, from wet wool, from the storm-heavy male scent of Cain Silvermane standing across the map table. Her wolf threw herself at the inside of Celeste's bones, frantic, pleading, exultant. "Mine." "No," Celeste whispered, but she wasn't sure if she said it aloud. Cain's chest expanded on a sharp inhale, nostrils flaring as if he couldn't stop himself from pulling her scent deeper. The silver in his eyes flared molten bright, almost gold at the edges. His jaw flexed hard enough to stand out under stubble. He looked like a male hit by lightning and still standing. Around them, the scouts shifted uneasily. "Alpha?" the captain said carefully. Cain didn't look away from Celeste. "Out." No one moved. Now. The single word dropped with alpha force. The air in the tent seemed to thicken, pressing against skin and lung. Wolves who had stood through battle obeyed without another sound, boots scraping over packed earth as they filed out. The flap slapped shut behind them. Silence crashed down. Celeste was suddenly aware of her bound wrists, the ache in her lower back, the raw burn on her shoulder, the life turning inside her belly, and the bond, bright and terrifying, stretching from her sternum to him like a line of heated wire. Kane released the table in splinters and rounded it slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. He stopped an arm's length away. "Look at me," he said, voice rougher now. Not command. Request. She was already looking. Couldn't stop. His gaze locked on hers with devastating intensity. Storm gray irises threaded with silver fire. No mockery. No calculation. Only shock and something older than language. If she stepped forward, she knew in blood and marrow, she could lean into him and the shaking in her body would ease. The realization scared her more than the trackers, more than the brand. She had been cast out as filth, branded traitor, pregnant by another male. A mated she-wolf carrying another bloodline was whispered about like plague, a curse, a weakness enemies could rip apart in public. If she accepted this bond, he would be tied to her scandal. If she accepted this bond, they would use her to break him. Panic surged, sharp and clean. Celeste straightened despite the pain and lifted her chin with formal rigidity she had not felt since before the council fire. "By moon witness and blood law," she said, forcing each word through a dry throat. "I, Celeste Darkhollow, reject the mate bond offered by Kane Silvermane." The moment the last syllable left her mouth, something tore. Not physically, though it felt like claws raking under her ribs. Kane jerked like he'd been struck across the throat. His hand went to the edge of the table again, knuckles whitening. A strangled sound escaped him, half growl, half pain swallowed too quickly. Celeste hated herself for it. She hated the relief and grief crashing together in her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." He stood very still for 3 long heartbeats, breathing through his nose, control snapping back into place one tendon at a time. When he spoke again, his voice was low and steady, but it carried strain. "Who did this to you?" She blinked. "What?" He looked at her shoulder where the exile brand hid beneath torn cloth, then at the leather around her wrists, then lower, where her belly rounded under the blanket. His throat worked once. "Who burned you?" he said. "Who hunted you? Who thought leaving you in winter with a pup in your womb was justice?" The words knocked her off balance more than anger would have. "You should be furious," she said. "I rejected you." "I am furious." His eyes flashed. At them. Her laugh came out brittle. "You don't even know if I'm guilty. Your scent says fear, pain, exhaustion." He took one measured breath. No deceit. She opened her mouth with a bitter retort, but a hard cramp seized her abdomen, folding her over before sound came out. She grabbed the table edge and hissed, teeth clenched. Pressure banded her lower belly, then sharpened. "Not labor. Please not labor." Kane moved instantly, then stopped himself a handspan away from her arm. "May I?" he asked. The question hit her like a blow. Males in power didn't ask. They took. She gave the smallest nod. His hand closed around her elbow, warm, careful, steadying her through the contraction. He guided her toward a chair near the brazier instead of forcing her down. When she sat, shaking, he crouched in front of her so their eyes were level. "How long between pains?" "Not regular," she managed. "Since the storm. Worse when I'm cold." He glanced toward the tent flap, then back. "I'm calling my healer." Celeste caught his sleeve before she could stop herself. "Don't send me back outside." A flicker, rage, fast and lethal, crossed his face at the thought. You're under my roof now. No one puts you out. He rose and barked for the healer. When two wolves entered and started for Celeste, Kane's gaze snapped to her wrists. Untie her, he said. The scout hesitated. Alpha? Protocol? Untie. Her. Leather loosened. Blood returned to Celeste's hands in painful pins. Kane didn't touch her again until she reached for the water skin and her fingers trembled too badly to hold it. Then he asked with his eyes, waited for her nod, and tilted it for her with infuriating gentleness. Outside, a howl rose as the blood moon climbed. Red light seeped through the seams of the war tent and painted Kane's profile in crimson and shadow. Mate rejected. Bond bleeding. Enemy at his threshold. And still, when she couldn't hide the next shudder of pain, he said quietly, Stay awake with me, Celeste. You're safe tonight. She did not believe in safety, but for the first time since the brand, she believed he meant it. Night deepened and the camp settled into war shift rhythms, boots in snow, sentry calls, the clink of tools in the rebuilding yard. Celeste lay on a narrow cot in a side tent warmed by banked coals, wrapped in borrowed furs that smelled faintly of cedar soap and smoke. The healer, an older she-wolf named Mira, had checked her pulse, her belly, the tension in her back. Stress contractions, Mira had said. Your body is trying to defend itself. We keep you warm, hydrated, calm. If they regularize, you wake me before fear convinces you to hide it. Easy instructions. Impossible body. The pains came in waves anyway, gripping, releasing, leaving her hollow and shaky. Every time she dozed, she jolted awake certain she could hear dark hollow trackers at the door. Near midnight, the tent flap moved and Kane ducked inside carrying a basin that steamed in the cold air. He had shed his formal coat. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms, scars pale against tan skin. The bond flared at his nearness, painful now, like a bruise pressed from the inside. Celeste pushed herself upright, hand flying to the knife by her pillow. Kane stopped immediately, lowering his eyes in deliberate non-threat. It's me. I can see that. He set the basin near the cot, then held up folded cloths. Mira said your feet are ice. Heat helps the cramping. A pause. May I sit? Suspicion warred with exhaustion. Why are you doing this yourself? Because I'm awake. His mouth tightened. And because I know what it is to have your body decide your fate while everyone else argues politics around you. That answer was not what she expected. She gave a stiff nod. He sat on the stool at the end of the cot, keeping distance until she extended her feet from under the fur. His hands were large, calloused, startlingly gentle as he wrapped warm cloth around her soles and ankles. He never pulled her closer than necessary, never lingered. Every movement telegraphed restraint. Another contraction hit. Celeste's fingers dug into the blanket. Kane reached, then halted midair. Hand? He asked. She stared at him through clenched teeth, then put her hand in his. He braced her through the wave, silent, steady pressure only. No claiming squeeze, no possessive growl. When it passed, he released her at once and offered water. 3 swallows, he said. Mira's orders. Despite herself, a ragged laugh escaped her. You take orders? From healers? Always. They bite harder than alphas. Something in her chest eased by a fraction. Hours bled past in fragments. Pain, warmth, water, his quiet presence. At one point her shaking worsened, not from cold but from memory. The hiss of the branding iron, her father looking away. Kane noticed before she could hide it. Your breathing's running too fast, he said. I'm fine. You're reliving it. She turned her face toward the tent wall, humiliated by tears she refused to shed. Don't. A long silence. Then pages rustled. When she looked back, Kane was holding a weathered ledger book, corners worn soft with age. What is that? Old Silvermane records? Pre-war inventories? Oath logs? Land disputes? Boring enough to drag your thoughts somewhere else? He glanced up. May I read? The absurdity almost offended her. She nodded anyway. He began in a low, even voice. Names of grain counts, boundary stones, births logged under winter moons, arbitration notes from 3 generations prior, dry facts, measured cadence, a heartbeat made audible. Celeste listened because there was nothing else to hold on to. Gradually her breathing matched his rhythm. The terror spikes dulled. When a contraction came, she wrote it with one hand on her belly and one gripping the edge of the ledger, while Kane kept reading about sheep tallies and timber rights as if the world were ordinary and could be mended by patient accounting. Near dawn, she said hoarsely, "You should hate me." His eyes stayed on the page. For rejecting a bond you didn't ask for while injured and hunted? She swallowed. For carrying another male's pup. That made him stop. He closed the ledger carefully, set it aside, and met her gaze. The pup is innocent, he said. So are you until proven otherwise. In this camp we do not punish women for surviving men. The blunt certainty in his tone snapped something loose inside her. Grief, maybe, or disbelief. You don't know what this will cost you, she whispered. I know exactly what cowards cost Pax. His jaw hardened. Rest, Celeste. He stood to leave, then looked at the knife by her pillow. Keep it, he said. No one will take it while I lead. When he was gone, she lay awake under the firs, feet warm for the first time in days, listening to wind scrape along the tent and the distant murmur of sentries changing watch. She still didn't trust fate, but she slept for an hour without seeing the brazier. By afternoon, the entire central hall of the rebuilt stronghold smelled like wet stone, pine pitch, and tension. They had moved council indoors because of the blood moon aftermath winds. Timber beams ribbed the high ceiling. Unfinished walls showed fresh chisel marks where fire-blackened rock had been replaced. A long table dominated the center, ringed by Silvermane officers, 2 allied elders, and representatives from smaller clans sheltering under Kane's protection. Celeste stood near the rear post with Mira, blanket around her shoulders, knife still at her belt. She had argued against attending. Kane had said, "They discuss your fate. You hear it with your own ears." Then he had placed a chair within reach and made no move to force her into it. Now voices collided over maps and supply tallies until Elder Rowan, thin, sharp-nosed, allied by treaty not blood, slapped a palm on the table. "This is madness," Rowan snapped. "Dark Hollow brands one of their own and suddenly she appears here on Blood Moon Night? Either she is bait or she is diseased luck. Send her away before Shadowfang uses her scent as pretext." Mira bared her teeth softly. Celeste kept her face blank. Another male, Beta Harlan of an outlying wolf line, leaned back in his chair and looked Celeste over with open disdain. "Enemy blood in our walls," he said, "with a bastard pup that might carry claim mark rumors. You expect our warriors to bleed for that?" The word bastard landed like a thrown stone. Across the table, Kane had been listening in hard silence, hands braced on the wood. At Harlan's insult, something in him went still, too still. He rose, no shout, no theatrics, just presence unfolding to full alpha magnitude. Power rolled out of him in a crushing wave, candles guttered. Several wolves dropped their gaze on instinct, one physically staggered back from the table edge. Kane's claws extended, black and curved, scoring lines into the timber as he leaned forward. "Say that again," he said quietly. Harlan tried to hold his ground, scent spiking with fear and pride. "I said we should not risk the pack for—" Kane moved. One blink he was at the head of the table. The next he had Harlan by the throat, slammed against a support post so hard dust rained from the rafters. Not enough force to break, enough to terrify. Her name, Kane said, voice feral now, is Celeste. He tightened his grip just long enough for Harlan's eyes to bulge, then released, and stepped back with visible effort. Discipline leashed around violence. Any wolf who insults her or her child, Kane said to the room, issues challenge to me directly. You may question strategy. You may not spit on the vulnerable because it is convenient. Rowan bristled. You would risk coalition over one female you barely know. Kane turned, eyes bright as a struck blade. I will not build a kingdom on the same rot that burned the old one. We do not exile pregnant women into winter. We do not call children currency. We do not let fear choose our law. A chair scraped. Harlan, humiliated and red-faced, shifted halfway, bones cracking, claws pushing through fingertips. Then I challenge. He lunged. Kane met him in 2 steps. He pivoted, caught Harlan's wrist, and used the male's momentum to slam him face first onto the table, pinning his arm in a joint lock that made tendons stand out white. Harlan snarled and thrashed. Kane did not strike his throat, did not rip, did not kill. He held until the fight drained into ragged panting. Yield, Kane said. Harlan spat blood onto the floor. Kane increased pressure by a fraction. Bone creaked. Yield. Yield. Kane released him instantly and stepped away, chest heaving once. You are stripped of command and exiled beyond the west tree line by sunset. 2 days' rations. No escort harm unless you break border. Shock rippled through the council. Exile was severe. Mercy to a challenger who had just attacked an alpha in council was rarer. Rowan stared. You let him live? Kane wiped blood from his knuckles with a cloth, expression carved from stone. Yes, so everyone here understands the difference between justice and slaughter. His gaze swept the room, landed briefly on Celeste. Not possessive. Anchoring. No one touches her, he said. No one threatens her pup. If you cannot abide that, leave my walls now and pray, Shadowfang is kinder. No one moved. Meeting adjourned in strained fragments. Wolves filed out whispering, some angry, some thoughtful, none daring to sneer at Celeste as they passed. Mira squeezed Celeste's forearm and left to mix herbs, giving her privacy she hadn't asked for. Kane approached only when they were nearly alone. Are you hurt? He asked. Celeste shook her head. Her pulse was still racing from the display, but not with fear of him. Something more complicated. You could have killed him, she said. I know. You didn't. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I've killed enough males who gave me no choice. Harlan gave me one. Celeste studied him, the controlled breathing, the still retracted claws, the effort it had clearly cost him to stop at restraint. In Dark Hollow, men called that softness. Here, it looked like strength honed to a blade edge and kept sheathed unless needed. Why defend me that hard? She asked, almost angry at how much the answer mattered. He took a breath. Because leadership means deciding who gets to feel safe in your territory. His eyes held hers, steady and unflinching. Right now, that includes you. The bond throbbed between them, wounded but alive. Celeste looked down at her own hand resting on the hilt of her knife. For days she had slept with fingers wrapped around it so tightly her knuckles bruised. Tonight, for the first time since the gate slammed behind her, the idea of letting it lie beside her instead of in her fist didn't feel like surrender. It felt, dangerously, like the beginning of trust. It felt dangerously like the beginning of trust. A horn split the air outside. 3 short blasts, 1 long. Kane's head snapped toward the hall doors. Gate signal, he muttered. Parley. Before he could move, a sentry shoved through the doorway, breath fogging in the cold draft. Alpha, Shadowfang courier under truce markings. The room went still all over again. Kane's expression hardened into command. How many with him? 2 escorts at the outer line, unarmed, as far as we consent. As far as you consent, Kane repeated. Bring him to the lower chamber. Full witness circle. The sentry nodded and ran. Celeste felt Mira's words from earlier echo in her skull. If fear convinces you to hide it, wake me anyway. She hadn't realized fear could make your body forget to breathe. Kane looked at her once. Stay with me. It wasn't an order. It was worse. She followed him. The lower chamber had once been a storage vault beneath the old hall. Now it served as a secure council room. Stone walls sweated cold, torches hissed. Wolves lined the perimeter, Silvermane guards, allied elders, 2 neutral arbiters with moon ink scales tattooed over their wrists to signify legal witness status. The courier was young, maybe 20, his dark braid bound with black cord and a narrow band of iron stamped with the Shadowfang sigil. He stood with theatrical calm in the center of the room, chin high despite the dozen predators surrounding him. When Kane entered, the courier bowed just enough to avoid insult. Message for Kane Silvermane, he said, from Alpha Alistair Shadowfang, sovereign of the Eastern Reach. Read it, Kane said. The courier drew a roll of hide from inside his cloak. Black wax cracked under his thumb. The scent hit first. Ink, tallow, and Alistair's mark layered over everything like oil on water. The courier read in a carrying voice. To Kane Silvermane, who confuses appetite for leadership. A few wolves growled low. You shelter Celeste Darkhollow, lawfully condemned by her own pack for treason and collusion. You shelter the unborn issue she carries, rumored bearer of dormant claim mark over the North Fork, Glass Run, and Briar Teeth territories. Murmurs broke along the wall. Even hearing it spoken made Celeste's skin crawl. The courier continued. Surrender both for lawful judgment at my tribunal within 3 days, and I will grant Silvermane non-combatants safe passage and recognize your reduced borders. Refuse, and I will consider your refusal admission of conspiracy. I will break your rebuilt walls, salt your den sites, and hang your officers from your own gate posts as warning to all packs led by lust-blind fools. He lowered the hide, but he wasn't finished. A thin smile curved his mouth as he spoke the final line from memory. You have already seen what forged loyalty can do to a female with no shield. Imagine what truth can do to a king with one weakness. Silence followed, heavy and electric. Kane didn't move for 2 full heartbeats. Then, is that all? The courier spread his hands. There is an addendum. He produced a second strip, shorter. Signed by Darkhollow Council Elder Maris and Beta Corvin, attesting they will honor Shadowfang Tribunal outcome. Celeste's stomach turned. Corvin. Of course. One of the neutral arbiters stepped forward, took the strips, scented them, then frowned. Signatures are real, she said quietly. Wax seal mixed, Darkhollow pine pitch and Shadowfang resin. So it wasn't rumor, it was alliance. Kane's voice dropped to iron. Tell your Alpha this. Silvermane does not surrender women or children for spectacle. The courier tilted his head. Then prepare your pyres. Before any guard could react, Celeste spoke. Did he forge the patrol reports himself? She asked. Or did he have someone in Darkhollow do it? The courier's eyes slid to her, amused. You still think anyone cares about innocence? Kane stepped between them, not touching her, just blocking the line of scent. You've delivered your words. Leave while truth still protects your throat. The courier smirked, bowed again, and let himself be escorted out. As the door shut, the room exploded into voices. He can't be serious. He already absorbed Stonewater. Why not us? If the claim mark rumor spreads, every border wolf will come sniffing. 3 days is not enough to relocate families. Kane hit the stone table with his palm once. The crack silenced everyone. "War Council in 1 hour," he said. "Evacuation protocols now. Non-combatants to inner ridge routes by dawn. No lone patrols. Double watch on healer tents and food stores." Elder Rowan looked from the message strips to Celeste and back, face pinched. "If handing over one exile prevents annihilation..." Kane turned his head slowly. Rowan stopped talking. The Alpha of nothing yet and everything to lose said, very softly, "Finish that sentence and you can walk to Shadowfang yourself." No one spoke after that. By the time moonrise silvered the snow, the camp had shifted into siege rhythm. Children were moved in bundled lines toward hidden caverns west of the ruined keep. Storehouses were inventoried and resealed. Sentries changed twice as often. Every wolf who approached the central hall was checked for scent-masking herbs and false markings. Kane moved through all of it like a blade, issuing orders, adjusting routes, listening to objections, overruling panic. Celeste stood under the overhang outside Mira's infirmary and watched the territory brace around her. Around because of her. A pair of younger warriors passed too near, voices low but not low enough. 3 days until he comes. He won't need 3 if someone leaves the gate unbarred. You saying we should hand her over? I'm saying I'd like my sister alive. They went silent when they realized she'd heard and kept walking without apology. Celeste pressed a palm to her belly until the tightness eased. The pup rolled once, then stilled. Kane found her there an hour later, snow dusting his shoulders, jaw shadowed with fatigue. He carried a map tube under one arm and 2 tin cups in one hand. "Willow bark tea," he said, offering one. Mira approved. "You ask permission from everyone," Celeste said. "Only the people I don't want to fail." The warmth of the cup bled into her fingers. She didn't drink yet. "They're right to be afraid," she said. "Alistair is counting on that." "He's counting on division," Kane corrected. "Fear is just his lever." She gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "And I'm the fulcrum." He didn't deny it. Wind dragged smoke from the cook fires across the yard. In the distance, axes thudded as wolves reinforced outer palisade stakes. Celeste stared out toward the dark tree line. "If you had accepted my rejection and sent me away that first night, none of this lands on your people." Kane leaned one shoulder against the stone post beside her, not touching, near enough that she could feel the heat of him in the cold. "If I had sent you away," he said, "I'd still have Alistair on my border by spring. He doesn't stop at one demand. Predators like him call it peace, while they pick bones clean." She believed that. She hated believing that. A runner sprinted into the yard, mud and blood crusted up to his knees. "Alpha!" Kane straightened instantly. "Report." "Supply sled from North Fork ambushed 2 miles out. 4 dead, 2 missing. Survivors said attackers wore no insignia until retreat, then flashed Shadowfang bands." The runner swallowed hard. "And they left this nailed to a pine." He held out a shard of wood burned with a symbol, a crude crescent split down the middle. Celeste felt Kane go very still beside her. "Get the survivors to Mira," Kane said, "then to debrief." The runner nodded and tore off again. Kane looked at the burned symbol, then at Celeste. "He's testing response time, pushing out her nerves. Making wolves ask if I'm worth the blood." Kane's mouth hardened. "You are not a ledger entry." "You keep saying that," she whispered. "But everyone else keeps counting." For a second his expression cracked, and she saw the wear beneath the alpha posture. Not weakness. Cost. "I can hold the line against enemies," he said. "I can't force trust into frightened wolves overnight." Celeste finally drank the tea. Bitter. Grounding. "Then maybe stop trying to shield me from what they're saying," she said. "I need to hear it." His brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to survive this, I can't keep being handled like fragile cargo." Something like approval flickered in his gaze. Fair. A horn called from the east watchtower. One long note, uncertain. Then silence. Both of them looked up. Kane handed his cup to a passing guard. Inside, he told Celeste. She didn't move. He met her eyes. Inside, please. The please did what command might not have. She went. The watch alarm proved false. An elk herd spooking near the ridge, but no one settled fully afterward. Tension clung to the camp like frost that refused to melt. Near midnight, after another council round and 2 healer checks, Celeste slipped out of her cot and followed a dim corridor toward the archive alcove beneath the main stairs. She couldn't sleep. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw black wax seals and Corvin's signature beside Shadowfang ink. The archive was small. Stone shelves, bound ledgers, charcoal maps, and one low brazier throwing amber light. Kane was already there, seated at the table with his sleeves rolled up again, sorting old treaty books into stacks. He looked up when she entered. Couldn't sleep? She shook her head. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit then. Help me find every clause Alistair might try to twist. She sat. For a while they worked in silence. She read brittle pages while he cross-referenced boundary law and challenge rights. The quiet wasn't empty. It felt like standing beside someone in a storm and not having to explain why you were soaked. At last, Celeste set down a ledger and said, without looking up, I didn't reject you because I felt nothing. Kane's page-turning stopped. She forced herself to continue. I rejected you because I felt too much. Too fast. And I was terrified of what it would do to you. Dark Hollow teaches that a pregnant, unmated female is already suspect. A mated one carrying another male's child is worse. Blasphemy? Kane said dryly. Contamination. Political rot. Pick your word. He leaned back slightly, watching her with careful attention. Who was he? The question could have cut. Instead, it landed soft. His name was Lior, she said. Scout. No rank worth mentioning. He was kind and terrible at cards and thought I laughed too loudly. Her throat tightened. He died on a border skirmish report 3 months ago. Closed casket. No scent confirmation. Just a report signed by Corvin. Kane's gaze darkened. You think the report was false? I think if Alistair could forge one thing, he could forge 10. And if Lior knew something... She swallowed. Then he died for it. Silence held for a beat. I'm sorry, Kane said. Simple. No platitudes. The sympathy nearly undid her. She laughed shakily instead. Look at me, still crying over a dead male while the moon tries to hand me a fated king. The moon can wait its turn. She looked up sharply. Kane's expression was steady, open in a way she hadn't seen in public. I won't erase your grief to make room for me, Celeste. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard. A sudden, hard kick pressed against the inside of her belly and she hissed, hand flying down. Kane half rose, then stopped. May I? He asked quietly. She nodded. He came around the table slowly and crouched beside her chair. He set his palm against the side of her belly over the blanket, careful and reverent. For a second, nothing happened. Then the pup kicked again, right into his hand. Kane's breath caught. His whole face changed. Wonder, fierce and unguarded. The bond pulsed warm between them, less like pain this time and more like a low, steady fire. Strong, he murmured. Celeste's laugh came out wet. Stubborn. Inherited. She should have pulled away. Instead, she covered his hand with hers, fingers fitting over callus and scar. The contact was small, devastating. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Any of it. Trust, bond, war. Neither do I, Kane said. I just know I'd rather face it with truth than fear. She closed her eyes briefly, forehead almost touching his temple. Not a kiss. Not yet. A shared breath. Outside, somewhere above the stone ceiling, a sentry shouted. Then another voice answered in panic. Fire! East doors! Fire! Kane was on his feet before the echo died. The camp erupted. By the time Celeste and Kane hit the yard, flames were already climbing the eastern supply sheds, orange tongues snapping at the night. Wolves ran in every direction, bucket lines forming, warriors pulling terrified non-combatants toward safer ground, sentries howling commands over the roar. Diversion, Kane snapped. It's a diversion. As if summoned by the word, a scream tore from the infirmary wing. Mira. Celeste ran before Kane could stop her, boots skidding in churned snow. 2 guards at the infirmary door were down, throats bloodied but alive. Inside, the air reeked of smoke and wolfsbane resin, sharp, bitter, wrong. 3 shadowed figures in partial shift moved between cots, black cloth over their lower faces, armbands turned inside out to hide sigils. One had Mira by the hair, blade at her neck. Another was rifling herb chests. The third turned at Celeste's entrance and grinned. Target acquired, he barked. Kane hit him like a battering ram from the side, sending both crashing through a screen divider. Bones cracked, the room exploded into snarls. Celeste ducked as a thrown dart hissed past her ear and buried itself in the wall. She yanked her knife free and drove forward at the wolf holding Mira. He shoved the healer toward her and slashed. Celeste twisted, felt steel skim her sleeve, then rammed her shoulder into his midsection with all her weight. 7 months pregnant made her slower. It also made her mean. They went down hard. He tried to roll on top of her. She jammed her forearm under his throat and drove the knife into his shoulder instead of his heart. Deep enough to disable, not kill. He screamed and backhanded her across the jaw. White sparks burst behind her eyes. Across the room, Kane had one attacker pinned against a support beam, claws at his throat. The second infiltrator, smaller, faster, snatched a satchel from the shelf and bolted for the rear flap. Mira! Celeste shouted. The satchel! Mira, shaking but upright, grabbed a clay jar from the table and hurled it. It shattered against the fleeing wolf's head in a rain of tincture and ceramic. He stumbled but kept running, vanishing through the flap into smoke. Kane slashed his captive's thigh and drove him face first to the floor. Who sent you? The wolf laughed blood. You know who. He jerked suddenly, biting down on something hidden in his cheek. Foam hit his lips. Poison. Damn it, Kane growled, forcing his jaw open too late. The wolf convulsed once and went still. Celeste was pushing up from the floor when pain knifed low through her abdomen, sharp, rapping, undeniable. She froze, breath stuttering. Not now. Another contraction slammed in before the first fully eased. Mira caught her shoulders. Celeste. Look at me. Celeste couldn't answer. All she could do was grip Mira's sleeve and breathe through clenched teeth while alarms outside shifted pitch. Less fire panic now, more battle call. A guard burst in, soot-streaked and wild-eyed. Alpha, East Gate breached. We've got Shadowfang fighters in the lower yard and... He swallowed. Dark Hollow sense with them. Kane's head snapped up. From beyond the infirmary walls came the deep, unmistakable thunder of a war horn from the tree line. 3 long blasts, answered by another farther north. Encirclement. Kane crossed to Celeste in 2 strides, dropping to one knee in front of her as if the chaos did not exist. Can you move? He asked. She nodded once, lying. He looked to Mira. Get her to the stone vault. 2 guards you trust with your life. No one else. Mira nodded, already reaching for Celeste. Kane squeezed Celeste's hand once, hard, anchoring, then rose, turning toward the door and the sound of wolves screaming in the yard. Before he could take a step, an arrow punched through the open flap and buried itself high in his shoulder. He staggered, hit the door frame, and ripped it out with a snarl. The shaft tip was black with wolfsbane. The shaft tip was black with wolfsbane. Cain! Celeste lunged as his knees dipped. He caught himself on the doorframe, breath sawing through his teeth, and snapped the arrow in half so Mira could yank the rest through. Blood ran hot over his arm, dark in the firelight. "Don't pull," Mira started, then swore. Too late. "Celeste, pressure here." Celeste slammed her palm over the wound, while Mira ripped open a packet of crushed herbs and packed the entry and exit points. Cain's skin was already going clammy under her hand. Outside, the lower yard had become a roar of steel, claws, and panic. The flames at the east doors painted everything in stuttering orange. Somewhere close, a child cried. Somewhere farther, wolves screamed battle calls in Shadowfang cadence. A horn boomed from beyond the palisade. Then a voice, amplified by Alpha Force and thrown over the walls. "Cain Silvermane, send out the exile and the whelp, and your dead stops tonight." Alistair. The name wasn't spoken, but Celeste knew his scent now from wax and threat. Bitter resin, cold metal, rot under perfume. It rode the wind like a stain. Cain tried to rise too quickly, swayed, and would have gone down if Celeste hadn't braced him. "You are not going out there like this," she snapped. His eyes flashed silver despite the poison. "My wolves are dying out there. And they'll die faster if their alpha drops in the yard." Another contraction knifed through Celeste's belly hard enough to make her fold. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, refusing to make a sound. Mira saw anyway. "Both of you, listen to me," Mira barked, voice sharp as a blade. "Cain, that dose is light but fresh. You'll get fever, tremor, rage spikes. I can blunt it, not erase it. Celeste, those pains are stress-triggered and escalating. You shift right now. You could tear something you can't heal in a night." "I may not get a night," Celeste said. The door slammed open again. Elder Rowan stumbled in with soot on his cloak, one arm bloodied. Inner gates holding, outers compromised. Shadowfang pulled back from the breach after setting the stores. It was a strike and fade. We counted 6 bodies in their colors, 4 in ours. His gaze snagged on Cain's shoulder, then Celeste's face. "He wants us frantic." Cain shoved to his feet, jaw clenched against the poison tremor. "Evacuation route? North Ridge clear for now. Take non-combatants and go." Rowan hesitated. "And the rest?" Cain looked at the wall as if he could see through stone to the burning yard. "Defensive retreat to the Parley Stones line by dawn. Open ground. Witness law. If Alistair wants a spectacle, I'll give him one on terms he can't hide behind." Celeste's head snapped up. "Parley Stones?" He met her eyes. He can't assault under open challenge without exposing dishonor to every allied alpha. "He will anyway," she said. "That's who he is." "Then we make sure everyone sees it." A runner crashed in behind Rowan, clutching a leather satchel. "Recovered from infiltrator who fled Infirmary Alpha. He bled out by South Ditch." Mira grabbed the satchel, dumped it onto the table. Folded pages, wax seals, 2 coin rolls stamped Shadowfang, and a narrow ledger strip marked with Dark Hollow patrol numbers. Celeste stared. Her name, repeated. Beside payment tallies. Corvin's mark. Elder Maris's private seal. And a Shadowfang countersignature in a hand she didn't know, but under it, pressed into wax, the wolfhead sigil Alistair used on his threat. Her pulse roared. This was it. Proof in ink and scent. Another wave of pain hit. She braced on the table, breathing through iron and smoke. Cain saw the pages, then her face, and something changed behind his eyes. "No," he said immediately. "Whatever you're about to suggest. No." "I'm suggesting nothing," she lied, grabbing the ledger strip. "I'm deciding. Celeste, you said he counts on division. Fine. Then stop dividing me from this fight." The horns outside called again, 3 long notes, taunting. Cain took one step toward her and had to catch himself as the poison ripple hit. For the first time since she met him, his control visibly shook. "Please," he said, rough with strain, "don't make me choose between winning and keeping you breathing." "Then don't choose for me." She lifted the ledger page between them like a blade. "He built this on my silence." For a second the room held only crackling fire and battle noise. Then Kane exhaled once, hard. "What do you need?" "Witnesses, neutral arbiters, every alpha we can summon by moonrise tomorrow. And one living Dark Hollow wolf who saw this happen." Rowan gave a bitter laugh. "If one exists." A voice came from the infirmary cot behind them, weak and scraped raw. "One does." They turned. A wounded male Celeste hadn't noticed in the chaos pushed himself up on an elbow. Dark Hollow scent, old familiar. Her cousin Bran, 2 years older, scar through one brow from training spars. "Bran?" Celeste whispered. His eyes found hers, full of shame. "Corvin paid me to switch patrol logs, said it was border strategy, said no one would get hurt." He coughed blood into his palm. "Then they branded you and sent trackers. I ran when I realized." He looked at Kane. "I'll testify. Public. Under truth scent." Kane's gaze cut to Rowan. "Get runners. Wake every treaty wolf within 2 territories. Blood Moon parley at the Standing Stones tomorrow night." Rowan nodded and was gone. Mira shoved a cup into Kane's hand. "Drink." He did, never taking his eyes off Celeste. Outside, the fire finally began to die under bucket lines and snow. The first phase of Alistair's attack had done exactly what it was meant to do: wound, terrify, divide. It had also handed Celeste a ledger soaked in his fingerprints. She curled her hand around it until the paper creased and said, through pain and smoke, "He wanted me crawling. He gets me standing." By dawn, the camp had moved. Silvermane non-combatants threaded north under heavy guard. Warriors and allied lines took positions near the old Blood Moon parley stones, a circle of ancient standing rock in a snow-cleared basin where challenge law outranked pack borders. Kane argued for Celeste to remain at the rear with Mira. Celeste waited until the third time he said, "You're not a shield," then answered, "Exactly. I'm the witness." He stopped fighting her after that. By dusk, wolves were arriving from every direction: Grey Ridge, Hollow Pine, Red Creek, Iron Vale. Some came because they honored Kane. Some came because they wanted to see him fail. All came because Blood Moon challenge law demanded attendance when called under oath. The moon rose huge and red over the pines. Celeste walked into the stone circle wrapped in a dark cloak, Bran at her side on shaking legs, Rowan and 2 neutral arbiters behind, Kane 1 pace to her right. His shoulder was bound, his face carved from focus, poison pallor mostly burned off by will. At the opposite edge waited Alistair Shadowfang. He was handsome in the way venomous things are: black hair braided with silver wire, immaculate war coat, a smile that never touched his eyes. Corvin stood 2 steps behind him. So did Elder Maris of Dark Hollow, flanked by wolves who had once shared Celeste's den fire songs. Her parents were there too, in the second rank. Her mother's mouth trembled. Her father looked a decade older. Alistair spread his hands theatrically. "So this is the bitch who bent 2 packs around her belly." Kane's growl rolled low. Celeste stepped forward before he could answer. "I name you as architect of false accusation, forged patrol reports, and conspiracy to unlawfully seize claim through my execution." Alistair laughed. "Bold words from condemned meat." "Not condemned." Celeste held up the ledger pages. "Framed." She laid each piece on the witness stone: patrol log copies with altered times, coin payments to Corvin, Maris's seal beside Shadowfang resin, and the courier addendum. Murmurs spread through the ring. Wolves leaned in to scent wax and ink. Alistair didn't even glance. "Forgeries." "Then swear it under scent." His smile thinned. Celeste drew her knife. Kane's hand twitched toward her, then stilled when he saw where she aimed. She sliced her palm deep enough for blood to run. Gasps snapped around the circle. Ancient trial right was rarely invoked now, too raw, too undeniable. Celeste pressed her bleeding hand to the witness stone and spoke into the red moonlight. By old law, I call truth sent. Let liar's breath sour and truth hold clean. The cold air changed. Her blood, silver bright under moonlight, carried her wolf's truth into the circle. Fear, pain, memory of the brand, the exact scent of Corvin's hand on false logs, the resin tang of Shadowfang wax in Dark Hollow Hall. Wolves reeled as it hit. Truth scent wasn't mind reading. It was something crueler. The body's inability to mask itself under oath. Brand stepped forward, voice shaking. I altered patrol entries on Corvin's orders. Payments came through Shadowfang Courier. Elder Maris witnessed. Liar, Corvin snapped, but his scent turned acrid at once. Several wolves hissed. One of the neutral arbiters lifted her tattooed wrists. I sent falsehood on Corvin and Maris. Maris snarled and looked to Alistair. Alistair finally dropped the polished mask. Enough. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. Celeste straightened, blood still dripping from her palm. I invoke lawful combat under open challenge. No slaughter. No attacks on non-combatants. Leader against leader. Witnessed. Kane looked at her, stunned, then grimly proud. Alistair's lip curled. You think law protects you? No, Celeste said. Witnesses do. For one stretched heartbeat, it seemed he might play along. Then Alistair flicked 2 fingers toward the ridge. Archers! The first volley screamed out of the dark. Kane moved on instinct, shifting half-form in a blur and throwing himself in front of Celeste as arrows rained. Shafts punched into his flank and the standing stone behind him. Wolves roared. The witness circle detonated into chaos. Dishonor! Someone shouted. He broke parley! Celeste didn't freeze. She saw the archer captain on the left ridge by his raised command bands and ran straight at him through the snow and confusion. A second volley was knocked. He never got to loose it. Celeste hit him low, driving shoulder to knees, and they tumbled down the embankment. He clawed for her throat. She slammed her blood-wet palm over his mouth and nose, forcing truth scent into him while she ripped the command band free. Shadowfang markings, visible, undeniable. She held it up and screamed, "Look!" Dozens of heads turned. Witnesses saw. A massive weight slammed into her from the side. Alistair, fully shifted, black fur and scar-slashed muzzle, jaws snapping for her neck. She twisted under him, pain exploding across her ribs as claws raked. Her wolf surged up with a snarl she could no longer contain. Against Mira's warning, against every ache in her body, Celeste shifted. Bone reformed in fire. Muscle tore and rebuilt, the world sharpened to scent and blood and moonlight. She met Alistair wolf to wolf. He outweighed her by at least 30 pounds. He drove her backward toward the stones, teeth flashing. Celeste ducked under his shoulder instead of meeting force with force, hooked his rear leg and tore open his hamstring in one savage bite. Alistair howled and stumbled. Celeste rammed him with all her weight into the nearest standing stone. He struck rock hard enough to crack a fang. Kane hit him a heartbeat later. The alpha king-to-be crashed into Alistair broadside, jaws at throat. They rolled in a whirl of fur and blood. Alistair clawed at Kane's wounded shoulder, trying to reopen the wolfsbane hit. Kane roared through it and clamped harder. Alistair kicked free just enough to gasp words through blood. You were supposed to crawl and disappear, he spat at Celeste. She shifted back halfway, human enough to speak, wolf enough to kill, and planted her bleeding hand against his muzzle. You were mine to judge, he hissed. Celeste bared her teeth. I was never yours to erase. Truth scent flooded his airway. He gagged, choking on the very weaponized narrative he'd built. Kane's eyes met hers once. Question, consent, shared decision. She nodded. Kane drove Alpha Force down through his jaws and snapped Alistair's neck on the stones. The sound cracked across the basin like a branch breaking in hard frost. Silence fell, then shattered into howls. Shadowfang wolves broke first. Some fled. Some dropped to their bellies in surrender. Corvin tried to run and was tackled by Rowan and 2 Iron Veil warriors before he made 10 strides. Maris collapsed to his knees, weeping denials no one believed. Celeste stood in moonlit snow, blood down her arm, lungs burning, and watched the lie that had exiled her die in front of every pack in the north. The blood moon hung full and red above the parley stones, painting everyone in scarlet and silver. Kane shifted back, blood streaking his chest and shoulder, and turned to Celeste with battle still crackling in the air around them. Wolves watched from every edge of the basin, stunned, wary, reverent. He came to her slowly as he had in the tent that first night, giving her room to step away. "Celeste," he said, voice rough with pain and something far more vulnerable. "Not as Alpha, not as king, as male." His hand, trembling faintly from wolfsbane and adrenaline, lifted but did not touch. "Do you choose me?" Everything in her went still. She could feel the torn bond between them, frayed by her rejection, mended by nights of care and blood and truth. She could feel her wolf pacing at the edge of skin, not frantic now but sure. She could feel her pup, exhausted but alive, a warm weight under her heart. She thought of the brand, of the gate slamming, of Kane kneeling to ask "May I?" when she expected force. She stepped into him. "Yes," she said, not whispered, carried. "Yes, Kane, I choose you." A sound left him, half growl, half broken relief. He bent his head, waiting one final breath for refusal. Celeste turned, bared the curve where neck met shoulder, and offered her throat. He touched his forehead to her temple first. A reverent pause. Then his teeth sank in. Pain flashed white-hot, sharp enough to steal breath. It punched through scar and muscle into something ancient and electric. Celeste gripped his forearms hard, nails biting skin, and rode the burn as it changed. Pain unfolding into heat, heat into a flood that poured through marrow and mind. The mating mark seared open like a second heartbeat. The bond snapped fully into place. She felt him. Storm and cedar, iron discipline, grief banked deep, fierce tenderness he showed almost no one. Felt his fear from tonight, his rage when she bled, his pride when she stood at the stone. It poured into her not as possession, but as joining. "Mine," his wolf rumbled through the link, fierce and awed. "Yours," she answered without words, pulse to pulse. "Mate." He released her carefully and licked the mark once, a soothing drag that made her shudder. Blood and moonlight and him filled her senses until the world narrowed to breath and skin and bond. Kane drew back, searching her face. "Too hard?" "Perfect," she whispered, hoarse. A wild, disbelieving smile flickered over his mouth. Celeste reached up, fisted her hand in his hair, and pulled him down. His eyes widened just before she bit into the thick muscle of his shoulder. He groaned. Surprise, pain, then hungry approval, as her teeth pierced. She held the bite long enough to mark, to claim, to make every watching wolf understand this was not rescue or charity. This was equal. When she let go, blood welled under her lips. She pressed her palm over his mark, then over her own. "Mine," she said against his skin. He caught her wrist, kissed her bloodied knuckles, and answered. "Yours." "Mate," they said together, almost laughing through exhaustion. Around them, the basin erupted in howls, some shocked, some joyous, some grudging but respectful. The sound rose to the moon and echoed off the stones. Cain wrapped both arms around her at last, careful of her belly, careful of every bruise, and held her as if anchoring to bedrock after a storm. Celeste pressed her face into his throat, breathing cedar and smoke and the clean metallic edge of blood. The bond settled, no longer tearing, no longer aching, simply there, warm and steady, a living thread under skin. No more exile, Cain whispered, forehead to hers. Celeste closed her eyes and smiled through tears she didn't hide. No more running, only us. He kissed her then, brief and fierce, and shaking with everything they had survived. When they turned back to the circle, they did it side by side. 3 nights later, the great hall of rebuilt Silvermane was packed shoulder to shoulder. Not with jeering accusers this time, with witnesses. Alistair's body had been burned under dishonor rites. Shadowfang Command fractured. Surviving lieutenants either swore new terms or were hunted out. Corvin and Elder Maris knelt in iron at the foot of the oath dais while arbiters read charges. Conspiracy, forged testimony, attempted unlawful execution, collusion in cross-pack slaughter. Bran testified. Rowan testified. Mira submitted poison residue and infiltrator bands. Even the Shadowfang courier, caught fleeing east, identified the payment chain when faced with truth sent. When asked for final statement, Corvin glared at Celeste and said nothing. Maris begged. Sentence was handed down by joint council. Rank stripped, territory claims void, life exile to the far Salt Barrens under Watcher Brand. No pack shelter, no command, no name rights. Darkhollow's seated leadership was dissolved before dawn. Celeste stood beside Cain as allied alphas stepped forward one by one to offer formal fealty. Some with full conviction, some with political caution, all binding under witnessed law. Rowan knelt and said, "I name Cain Silvermane Alpha King of the United Northern Packs." The title settled over the hall like a bell tone. Then the High Arbiter turned to Celeste. "And by challenge right, truth right, and Moonmark recognized before all witnesses, do you accept station as Luna Consort and Keeper of Oaths?" Celeste felt Cain's hand slide into hers, warm, steady. She lifted her chin. "I accept." The Arbiter placed the iron and silver oath torque in her palms. "Then keep us honest." "I intend to," Celeste said. Her first decree as keeper came before the cheering ended. "No wolf," she said, voice carrying to the rafters, "shall be cast out without lawful trial, neutral witness, and right of defense. Exile without process is abolished in all coalition lands." A beat of silence. Then the hall thundered approval. In the crowd, Celeste saw her mother crying openly. Her father stood rigid, shame etched into every line of his face. They were offered clemency terms with other Darkhollow survivors. Submit to new law, labor in rebuilding, no rank for 5 years. Her mother bowed acceptance. Her father followed, eyes finally meeting Celeste, is with a grief too late to mend and not too late to matter. Weeks later, snowmelt ran silver down the ridges. Celeste labored in a chamber at the heart of Silvermane Hall, not alone in a ruin but surrounded. Mira at her knees, Rowan guarding the door, Bran pacing outside with a bundle of clean cloths, Cain at her side with his forearm under her grip. She broke 2 of his knuckles. He didn't complain. "Breathe with me," he murmured when the final contraction crested. "That's it. You're stronger than this pain." "Shut up," she gasped, then bore down with a roar that shook the beams. A heartbeat later, a thin, furious cry split the room. Mira laughed, wet-eyed. "Healthy lungs. Goddess bless." She laid a slick, squirming infant on Celeste's chest, dark hair plastered to a tiny skull. One fist already punching at the air like an insult to the world. Cain made a sound Celeste had never heard from him, soft, wrecked wonder. "Our dawn," he whispered. Celeste looked up at him, sweat-soaked and shaking and radiant with relief. Hold us. He climbed carefully onto the edge of the bedding, one hand covering hers where it cradled their child, the other cupping the back of her marked neck. Through the bond she felt him. Fierce joy, aching gratitude, a vow without end. Outside the narrow window, first light broke over rebuilt walls and unburned pines. Not perfect, not painless, but theirs. Celeste kissed her baby's forehead, then Kane's mouth, and watched peace arrive one breath at a time.